All right, Chavtes Amud Beis, 29b, top of the page, 2 dots. Today we have another halacha related to another letter, and we're introduced to the Shiloh's Tinuk, which I mentioned yesterday, the question that you present to a child. We'll learn the parameters of that, and we'll look at the Rashi to see what Rashi says about that, so that we can understand exactly what the point here is. And then we have a rather famous story in the Gemara, which has a lot of application in terms of our hashkafa and understanding why Hashem does things and how Hashem does things in this world. Okay, so the Gemara begins. Rami bar Tamri, Rami, son of Tamri, I think I'm pronouncing the words right. Tavachamur, that was the father-in-law of Rami bar Dikuli. He was the father-in-law of Rami, there's no aleph there, so it's Rami, son of Dikuli. I'm not sure who these individuals are.
The same person.
Sorry?
Shidduch Gebeta says the who is the same person.
Not, so what's Chamua?
He just takes it out.
Oh, so there's one version that takes out the word Chamua and leaves the word Dehu. Rami bar Tamri, which is Rami bar Tikuli.
Because Tikuli and
Tamri could be, in other words, it's a nick.
Tikuli is the tree, and then
Tikuli is a tree, is the date tree, and Tamri is a date. So it could be a nickname that you did for a living. Yeah. So it's the same person. This is the Shidduch Gebeta's version. It's the same person.
Rami and Rami, one's with an aleph, but they're pronounced the same way.
Rami and Rami.
Yeah.
But it's similar. I see on the side here, Rabbi says. At any rate, so the story was that Ifsikale Kare Devav, the leg of the letter Vav, in his tefillin. All right, this passage is not in the mezuzah, so it's in tefillin. The letter of the Vav of the word Vayareg, the Vayareg of the word Vayareg was cut, or was cut off, was broken. So Ben Akiva with some perforation, it was perforated, the ink is missing on the word Vayareg, the first letter. So Asla Kamed Reb Zera, so he went before Reb Zera, he's the local sage, local Rav. Amar Le, so Reb Zera told Rami, Zil Aisi Yunka, go bring a child, Delay Chachim, that's not too intelligence, Delay Tipish, but not a fool. So what's this? He's not intelligent, he's not a fool. Let's see Rashi. Top left of the page, the left-hand column, second line from the top. Ball letter to Loi Chakim. That's the Rashi. Loi Chakim. He's not smart, meaning the I Chakim, because if he's smart enough, if he's intelligent enough, maybe he'll understand Shemacharafu Leimer Yahare Klapim Maila. He will understand the translation of the words. And if he understands the translation of the words, he'll understand that it would be incorrect, it would be inconceivable to read the verse as Yareg with 2 yuds, because the word reads Vayareg. So if the letter Vav is cut off, then it looks like a yud. So he's smart enough to know that the word wouldn't be 2 yuds. Why? Because, where's the verse? The verse is Vayareg Kashem Kol Bachar Beretz Mitzrayim, and God smit or killed the Egyptians, all the firstborn Egyptians of Israel. If you read the word Yareg with 2 yuds, it would mean that the word death doesn't apply to God acting, but actually happening to God. Which clearly, if the child knew the translation of the words, would know that that's not what it means. And therefore, even if he thinks the letter looks like a yud, he might say, oh, that says Vayareg, because he'll understand that it shouldn't be Yareg. V'omer Vayareg, and he'll tell us that the word reads Vayareg, even though it looks like a yud. So he can't be too smart. Good morning. He can't be too smart to know the translation, because he'll know that he'll know to lie essentially and say that the word is Vayareg. But like Tipish, we're in the Rashi, top left of the page. But he shouldn't be too foolish of a child. She'im Tipish, because if he's uneducated, he's a fool. Not a fool because he's not a fool in that he's a bad kid or anything like that, just because he's not smart, hasn't been educated enough yet. And Ein Yodea Likros Ela Shlema, and he won't be able to read unless it's a completely full word, full letter. So there's a balance here. And the balance is something like this. The child doesn't know the translation. He doesn't know the translation. But he's familiar enough with the letters that if the letters aren't perfect, he can identify it. That's what it is. If he can only identify the complete letter, this is what Rashi tells us. Oy, oy, ella, oy, shlema. There's some that disagree with that actually. But anyway, if he can only identify a complete letter, then we can't ask him the question. Because if it's not exactly the way a vav is supposed to be, he's going to say, I don't know what it is. So it's not going to help you. If he knows the translation, then he's going to use the context of the translation to know that even if the letter looks like something else, he's going to say what it says in the context. So then it's also no good. So you have to have a kid who's familiar enough with the letters to be able to identify a letter that isn't perfectly written, and yet doesn't know the translation. That's your window of the kind of child you need to be asking when you come to these kinds of questions. And we'll learn as we go forward many more such situations where you ask a child of such a nature of a letter. For example, when it comes to spacing, if the letters in a word are too spaced out, and when you look at it, you're not sure if that presents itself as a full word, or is it two words, or is it a bunch of letters standing stagnated. So you'll ask a child of such a nature who can identify letters well enough to be able to see when they're not perfect, but doesn't know the translation, so he wouldn't be able to put it together just because of the context. So he's the kind of child who would only put it together if he can actually put it together. And that's what you ask. And you ask him, what does the word read? And if he can identify it, then it's kosher. If he can't, then it's not kosher. Which gets another element we were talking about yesterday, the importance of getting mezuzahs and tefillin in check because of how difficult the halachas are and because of how many details go into it. Another thing that comes up here is that it's somewhat subjective. This is not a universal standard. It's a subjective thing. Each child might say it differently. So it's possible that you'll go to one scribe who will read it and he'll take it to a child, let's say, and the child he asked gave him the correct answer, so he'll give back to you and say the tefillin's kosher. And then you take the same tefillin a week later. People don't usually take the tefillin every week, but in theory, and you take it to another scribe, and the scribe says, oh my gosh, it's terrible, there's a word missing, or there's a letter missing, or the letter's broken. Why? Because he took it to a child, and that child didn't identify it. It's a very subjective experience. So you should know that going in, and not get all up in arms that one sefer said it's not kosher, one sefer said it is kosher, because a lot of these laws, especially when it comes to asking the child, there are more laws that are subjective, as we'll learn. But certainly, see, even yesterday's law, for example, if the right leg of the hay, we said, if it's cut off to the point if it's cut off, but there still looks like a minor letter, it still looks like a little yud up there, it's kosher. Who's to say where that line is? It's subjective to the reader. So many of those laws are subjective to the scribe. So it's important to know that. So don't get all up in arms. One guy says it's kosher, one guy says it's not kosher. This is probably what it comes down to. And you're right. The truth is actually that in Shulchan Aruch even mentions this idea of watching not the scribe as he writes it, but the one who's magia, the one who checks it over. Meaning every time a tefillin mezuzah or sefer Torah is written, they have one person. Sorry.
Spell proof. Magia.
Yeah, but not a computer, a human being. Mm-hmm. Computer is different. Computer tells you if there's a missing letter, but it can't tell you these things. So the process usually is that there's a person who writes it and then somebody else who checks it over, a different person who checks it over. And usually it's the job of the vendor who's buying mezuzahs from the scribe to have them checked before he sells them to you. Mm-hmm. So in theory, you can actually ask to watch the checker check it. In theory. In practice, it doesn't happen. But you could ask the magia if he says, I found something, but it's okay. Ask, what was it? You should know what it is. And then you know that this tefillin I have, it's kosher tefillin, but there's a letter that was a question, and he asked it to a child. Know these things, and then you'll know when you go to the next time why the person's being strict and said you need a new pair of tefillin because it's missing a letter. You can ask. It's your right to ask what's happening inside your tefillin or inside your mezuzahs, and so that you know what's going on. And here you're learning a little bit about the things, so you'll be a little bit more educated when you're asking these questions. Okay. And so Rabbi Zera tells Rabbi to go get this child who doesn't know translation, but is familiar enough with the letters that he can identify them, even if they aren't perfect. And Ikar Levi Yareg, if he reads it by Yareg, he doesn't know translation, he's just reading and pronouncing it. Then kosher, it's kosher, because he's identifying this imperfect letter as above. Eloi, if he cannot read it as Vayareg, rather he reads it as Yareg, two yuds, because he's missing the vav, If you can't read it by Yareg, then Yareghu, the word is read as Yareg because it's missing the vav. Uposel and the tefillin are invalid. Okay, now we get to the story that we mentioned in the Gemara. It's a very beautiful story. We'll learn the story now, the literal translation, and everybody can think about it, and I want you to think about it. It's a very deep story, and God willing, tomorrow we'll bring a little bit about the story, because there's a lot to be said about it. Amar Yehuda Marav. Yehuda said the name of Rab. When Moshe ascended on high, presumably we're talking about the time when he went to go receive the Torah, he went on high 3 times. Which one of these times I don't know. Does it say here? I don't think so. But when Moshe ascended on high, he found God. This is all metaphorical, obviously. That God's sitting, whatever that means. The kosher ksarim, and is tying up crowns or binding crowns. La'oisius, for the letters of, and Rashi says, for example, the tagin of the Torah. So someone asked yesterday about the crowns in the Torah. We mentioned the koitz shal yud, the spike in the yud. That's part of the actual letter. Here we're talking about, at least according to Rashi, tagin. We're talking about the crowns. If you look on the right-hand side of the page, you'll see, we'll learn more about these crowns, but you'll see Tosfos has a Zion there. 3 different Zions, different versions of how to make the crowns. But the point I'm showing you that is because it's, in addition to the letter, there are little, I'm not sure if you can see it, but there are little spikes coming up. It's not part of the letter, it's a tag, and in some circumstances it's actually kosher even if it's missing a tag. In some circumstances. But here already we see that Hashem himself, so to speak, is making these tagin, so even if, in theory, I can have a kosher tefillin without these tagin, without these crowns, but do you want to renege on crowns that Hashem himself is tying? Even if in theory it's kosher without them. But the Gemara is describing it as Hashem himself making these tagin, making these crowns. You don't want the opportunity to have those. You certainly would. So again, it's another reason why to be careful about what kind of tefillin you get and which mezuzahs. And you're allowed to ask, are all the tagin there? When you're buying the mezuzah, are all the tagin on these mezuzahs? The tag is in the lamed and the tag is in the different things. You're buying tefillin mezuzahs, you can ask. And if they tell you no, it's probably because they sell you a cheaper version, saying like, I want with the tagin, so it'll cost you an extra $5. But it's worth it, I think, for this. To get these little crowns that here Gemara tells us Hashem is making.
Tagins with a tet or a ta?
Tough. Tough. So Amar, where am I? Let's place. Okay.
Rabbi Yehuda?
No. Amar Lefanov, sorry. Amar Lefanov. So Moshe told Hashem, he comes up to heaven, he sees Hashem making these crowns. Rabbi Nishvela, Master of the universe, who's holding you back? That is to say, as Rashi explains it, is there something wrong with, like, who's holding back your letters you need to add to these things? Like, the letters aren't good enough. You made the letters too. You have to make crowns now? Amaloi, so Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu, actually, there is a very deep reason why I'm putting these crowns, because there's going to be somebody who's going to use them. Adam Echad Yesh, there is a person, She'asa Liyaz, that's going to come, B'Seif Kamadoras, at the end of many generations, Akiva ben Yosef Shmai, and his name is Akiva ben Yosef. This is none of them, the famous Akiva, who became a scholar, at the age of 40, who built the big academy with 24,000 students, who died, etc. This is the famous Akiva. So Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu there's going to be a gentleman, there's going to be a sage, at the end of many generations. His name is Akiva, son of Yosef, She'asid Lidrash, who's going to expound Al Kol Koitz V'Koitz, on every single spike, but as Rashi says, it's a tag, on every single crown, tilin shel halachas, heaps upon heaps of laws. He's gonna expound on every single one of these tagin. Each tag represents something, both sometimes in halacha, but certainly spiritually, to have much meaning to these crowns. And if Hashem says, I myself am putting them there, so that one day Akiva ben Yosef will be able to use them and expound upon them.
That's Rabbi Akiva?
This is Rabbi Akiva, yes. This is the famous Rabbi Akiva. So Moshe now is intrigued. Amal Afanov. So Moshe ben tells Hashem, the master of the universe, Heroli, show me this person. Show me who this Akiva is. This is incredible. Amar Loi. So Hashem tells Moshe, Chazer lecharecha. Literally, Chazer lecharecha means turn to your back. It's a way of saying, like usually.
Go back home.
No. It means like
Turn around and go.
I'm going to take you back into history, but it actually means take you forward. Because what's before you is that which you already have, that is your past. But what's behind you, in other words, something that you don't have yet, is the future. It's a kind of backwards expression. In English, you would say it the other way around, but in Hebrew, you say it this way. In other words, that which is before you, you have, is that which you've already gone through in your past.
Back to the future.
Yeah, because it's called back because you don't have it yet.
Yeah.
It's a little expression, but it means let's go into the future. So halach, so Moshe goes, v'yashav and sits besoif at the end of Shmona Shuris, at the end of 8 rows. There are 8 rows of students sitting in front of Rabbi Akiva listening, and Moshe sitting in the back. And he had no idea what they're saying. He couldn't follow the class. And Moshe, tashesh koichai, he started to feel like weak. Literally, he felt tashesh koichai.
Back to the future.
He felt let down. Like this is the Torah that he's giving. He doesn't understand the class. Doesn't understand the class. So Kivin Shigila Dover Echad, when Rabbi Akiva gets to one matter, one issue, Amrulai Talmidov, so the students in these 8 rows, or some of them, one of them, tell Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi, our teacher, Menachot, where do you know that law? This particular law, whatever it is. Amrulahen, so Akiva tells them, Halacha Moshe Sinai. It's a law that comes down from Moshe at Sinai. So Nesash Vadaita, Moshe felt better. Calm down. So even though, which is of course, there's so much to be said about this story. I'm going to leave it like this, and we'll deconstruct and analyze it, God willing, tomorrow more. But I want you to think about the story. Like, what does this mean? He doesn't know the very law that it came from himself. How did he not know it if Akiva says it came from him? This is something you should think about. We're going to talk about this tomorrow.
Why did he feel better?
Sorry?
Why did he feel better?
And now he feels better. Say, but now you know it.
Why would he feel better? Because Rabbi Akiva said it came from Moshe Sinai. It did?
It did?
It's like, I feel worse. Like, did I really give that?
Yeah.
How come I don't understand it then?
Yeah, so he doesn't know that which he gave, but he feels good about the fact that he gave. We have to think about all of this.
Very bizarre.
Yeah. So Chazar Baruch Nekadosh Baruch Hu. So he comes back to Hashem, and Amar Lefanov, and he tells Hashem, Ribbon Shalom, Master of the Universe, Yesh Lach Adam Kazeh. You have such a beautiful person like Akiva, who can expound even on the crowns of the Torah. But the nice and Torah al Yadi, and you're going to choose me to give the Torah. I couldn't follow the class. Let him give the Torah. He should be the one. Amar Loi, Hashem tells him, Shtoik, be quiet. Kach alav machshava. This is what's gone up in my mind, literally translated, meaning this is what I decided. I decided you should give the Torah. That's it. Machshava lefonai, my thoughts before me, or my thoughts. This is what I decided. Finished. I chose you, and that's it. Amar lefonov. So now Moshe tells back to Hashem, the Master of the Universe, you showed me his Torah, and I'm very impressed. Show me his reward. Amar Loi. So Hashem tells Moshe, go back. Again, go to the future. So he goes into the future. Moshe goes into the future. He sees, this is Rabbi Akiva is one of the 10 martyrs we read about in Yom Kippur, and he sees Rabbi Akiva's demise, where they peeled his face with iron rods. Very graphic, brutal death. Amar Lefanov. So now Moshe tells Hashem, the Master of the Universe, Zu Torah v'Zu Chayra. This is Torah, and this is its reward. This is the person that I just finished saying that he should give the Torah instead of me because I couldn't follow his class, and this is a reward. Amar Le. Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu the same answer. Shtoik, keep quiet. Kach Allah b'machshava lefanai. This is what I've decided. Finished. End of story. This is a very heavy story, as you can see. There's so much to be talked about on many, many levels. What this means. Hashem's telling Moshe to keep quiet. We know that Hashem gave so many things. First of all, we know that, like, for example, the Parah Aduma, the quintessential mitzvah that we don't understand, the Parah Aduma, the red heifer. Hashem gave Moshe the reasons. So here Moshe reaches the highest levels of knowledge, even understanding the most sublime of mitzvahs, and yet he can't follow Rabbi Akiva's class. And it comes to these things, Hashem can't tell him the reason. The Gemara doesn't say that Hashem told him the reason that we don't understand, like Hashem did with Parah Aduma. Moshe understood it, we don't. Fine. But here Hashem tells him, sorry, you can't understand this either. And it's the same answer. The same answer that Hashem tells him for when he complains, why'd you choose me? You should have chosen Akiva. Keep quiet, this is what I decided. It's the same exact answer Hashem gives for the suffering of a scholar, of a sage. Same answer, keep quiet, this is what I decided. What's the meaning of this answer?
That's the same answer Hashem gave when the martyrs were being killed.
That's right. So
was it the Malachim complained or something?
They're talking about
said,
this.
Be quiet.
I'll
destroy the whole world or something like that.
That's right. The 10 martyrs is a poetic write-up. That's actually it's not. It's a little misleading because the 10 martyrs, you would think that it's all in the same time. It's not. They're at different times. And what they've done is it's a poet who did this. He took all these stories and took the stories and interweaves it into like artistic poetry. So he picks up lines from the stories in their original. So he took the line from this Gemara. In other words, this is the origin of that line that you find in the 10 martyrs. But it comes from here. And that's the question. This is what I want you to think about. Hashem is equating, you can't understand why I chose you to give the Torah, and you also can't understand why I keep us suffering. Both of those things, the same equal answer. What's going on here? What's with this answer? What's Hashem? And what can we learn from this? And what does that have to do with the Tagin? What does all this have to do with the crowns and the letters? This is all dafka when Hashem is making the crowns and the letters. What's going on here? So all of this, God willing, we'll bring about tomorrow. But I definitely want you all to think about this because it's very, very powerful. Even on the surface, even if we don't get into any depth, it's a very powerful story. Have a wonderful day, everybody.